Imagine this for a second. A secret, dead-of-night military op by the United States. But the target? It's not some terrorist leader. It's the elected president of another country, snatched right out of his own bed. Now, this is all hypothetical, of course, but it's based on a really fascinating breakdown of how something like this could actually go down. So let's set the scene. The date, January 3rd, 2026. The world is just kind of shaking off the New Year's confetti, but a plan that's been months in the making is about to hit its explosive finale. And the time? It's just after 2 in the morning. The place? Caracas, the capital city of Venezuela. Inside a heavily guarded residence, President Nicolás Maduro is sound asleep. He has absolutely no idea what's coming for him. And here's how it all happens. First, you've got these stealth helicopters flying in super low over the ocean, totally off the radar. Then, bam, a cyber attack hits the power grid, and the whole city goes dark. And in that darkness, elite Delta Force commandos rappel onto the roof of Maduro's home. They breach the building, and in less than 5 minutes, the president is in their custody. Just like that. A swift, silent, and absolutely shocking military assault. Now get this. The reported reaction from the U.S. president, who was watching this whole thing live from Florida, is just as surreal as the event itself. He later told the press, "It was just like watching television." I mean, what a truly remarkable thing to say about a moment with such massive global significance. So this whole crazy scenario leaves us with 2 huge, and I mean huge, questions. First, why? Why on earth would America do something so drastic? And second, if something like this can happen, what does it mean for international law and for the sovereignty of every other nation on the planet? Okay, let's start with the official story, the justification that was given to the public. The U.S. government isn't framing this as an act of war or regime change. No. They're calling it a high-stakes law enforcement operation against a so-called narco-terrorist. The legal footing for the whole raid is a formal indictment from the Southern District of New York. And the charges are serious. We're talking narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, weapons charges, basically alleging that Maduro has been deep in the drug trafficking game since way back in 1999. But when you start to look at the data, the official story gets a little fuzzy. This table, for example, shows that Guatemala is estimated to move about 1,400 metric tons of cocaine a year. Venezuela? Around 250? So you have to ask yourself, if the goal is really to stop the flow of drugs, why focus on Venezuela? And here's another key point that just doesn't quite add up. The main highway for cocaine coming into the United States is the Pacific route, but Venezuela, as you probably know, is on the Atlantic. Geographically, it just doesn't line up as the main source of America's drug problem. Which leads us right back to the central mystery of this whole thing. If the main reason wasn't drugs, then what was it? Well, let's dig into the alternative explanation that the source material puts forward. The real reason, according to our source, is something far more valuable and, historically, way more contentious: oil. The story of the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela is, in a lot of ways, really just a story about the black gold under its ground. And just how much oil are we talking about? Try 303 times billion barrels. That's the size of Venezuela's proven crude oil reserves. It's a number that's almost hard to wrap your head around, and it completely changes the geopolitical game. To really put that number into perspective, just look at this chart. Venezuela's reserves don't just edge out other countries, they absolutely dwarf them. Even Saudi Arabia. We're talking about 1/5 of the entire planet's proven oil reserves. It is the biggest prize in the world. And the tension over this prize, it's been building for a century. American companies flooded in right after oil was discovered. But in the 70s, Venezuela started to take back control. The real breaking point, though, came in 2001, when Hugo Chavez fully nationalized the industry, basically kicking U.S. companies out. And not long after that, the U.S. sanctions began. This quote, from the day after the operation, is incredibly revealing. The president calls Venezuela's nationalization of its own natural resources the greatest theft in the history of America. He says, "They took oil away from us." That one quote really seems to connect all the dots, doesn't it? So if the motive really was oil, the global fallout was immediate and it was severe. Because an operation like this doesn't just topple a leader, it threatens the very foundation of international law and order. So what rules were actually broken? While domestically, the U.S. Constitution requires Congress to approve acts of war. That didn't happen. And internationally, the UN Charter explicitly forbids using military force against the sovereignty of another nation, a clear violation. Now, the administration's defense was to call this a law enforcement function. But look at the reality of the operation. Over 150 aircraft, citywide cyber attacks, airstrikes, and 40 casualties. Does that sound like a simple arrest to you, or does it sound like an act of war? The rest of the world's reaction was swift and overwhelmingly negative. You had nations from Brazil to China to Russia condemning the act. The UN Secretary General called it a clear violation of the Charter, and a whole bunch of countries jointly warned that this sets a dangerous precedent for a world that's supposed to be based on rules. And that leaves us with this final, really critical thought. The source argues that this whole thing isn't just about Venezuela or Maduro or even oil. It's about a world where might makes right. So you have to ask, when the most powerful nations decide the rules no longer apply to them, what does that truly mean for everyone else?